Thank you for joining the Lighthouse of Yeshua Light of Truth Ministries International. You have tuned in for another great session. Today's session, we will be talking about you are a victim of your own making. And now Prophet Templeton will go into the lesson.
Yes, our primary verse is Isaiah 3:12, and let us read it. In Isaiah 3:12, it says, skipping past the first part, it says, "O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths." So that is our primary verse. Now let's define a key word that you'll continually hear in this session, and that word is path. Now you may think you understand the meaning of that word, but from a spiritual perspective, it takes additional dynamics. The definition of path is the path of something is the line that it moves along in a particular direction. And everything has a particular path, but in this case, when the Bible talks about a path, it's saying that a human being falls into a pathway. His life pattern moves into a path, if you may. And so this is what we want to discuss. When we we come into this world under certain circumstances, and we actually fall into a particular pattern or a path, and which, by the way, a sub-definition of the word path is practices. And so a path is like a path would have a fork. It's like a fork in the road, or it's like an intersection. And, anytime you're moving, progressing along in a path, there are additional extensions that come in or cross over the path. And so when we take a path or make a decision, it leads into other choices. And this is what we're not conscious of. It leads into other choices. If we make a bad decision or an evil decision, if you may, it leads us into the perspective of making other bad decisions. So everything is a process, as Genesis 4:3 says. It says in time, everything is a process. Now, in Job 22:15, it says, "Will you keep to the old path that the wicked have trod?" Now, we are born actually into certain circumstances. Certain patterns are genetically in us. And this is what this verse is referring to. When we make a good decision, it is more than likely it will lead into other good decisions. And this actually will condition us out of some of those genetically inclinations.
Prophet, the scripture does tell us that, that there are three wills that God has for man. He has his permissive will, his good will, and his perfect will. His perfect will is the path of old that the scripture is telling us about. But most people, because, of the circumstances, as you say, they are taking the permissible will, which is not the best. And many times the permissible will is it's not the best will because it's a will or a path that leads us to decisions and doing things that God had never intended for us to do.
Oh, very good, prophetess. Very good. Yes, that's absolutely true. In Psalms 51:5, it says, "Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." And so we are, okay, there's three areas that condition us into the paths that we are born into and we are conditioned into, those two categories. And okay, the first is genetic, and this means that you're born into it, as Psalms 51:5 says. There are some genetic patterns that that cause you to do certain things that you do, and these things, in order to break those patterns, there are things the Bible tells you must do, that there are certain practices you must bring into your life. Okay, so the first is genetic. The second is childhood experiences. This is why the Bible says that to train up a child. So in your early childhood, there are experiences that create patterns, okay, of behavior, or pattern that bring about practices that you're not even aware that you do. And third is social and economic influences that take place. Our society and our economic situations that we're born into, they contribute to our moving further in the wrong direction, usually, but they can influence us in the right directions. But it's the wrong direction that is the most powerful, that has the most effect, the largest, especially at that early childhood stage, okay?
You know, that is so true with a lot of African American people that particularly live in the United States, because if you find that if a young lady's mother has been receiving assistance from the government, then that young lady will fall into that same bad path as her mother did, and if it's not broken, it'll continue to the next generation.
Exactly. That's the point that we're trying to make, and trying to get Christians to realize that there are influences that are progressing on our conscious state that we're not even aware of. And so these social and economic influences are the third most powerful aspect of influences that we find ourselves affected by. So Isaiah 3:12 again says, "O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err and destroy the way of thy paths." And so in that economic and social category, there are societal influences, we'll say.
Another good example of societal influences is in a person's work life. A lot of organizations, especially large 100 or 500 corporations in the United States, again in particular, but I'm sure this happens in other countries also, they will, once you reach a certain position in that corporation, they dictate to you how your life should go. They tell you what community to live in, what kind of car to drive, you know, where you should go to dinner, where you should go to church, what organizations outside of the corporation that you should be a member of. And these are things that are of the world and not good for you or what God has for you, but people fall into those paths.
Yes, we have to make a living, and this is what they know, but they should not be getting inside of your head.
Yes.
And these powers, these influences that they exhume on us, it indoctrinates patterns in us and patterns of behavior that are not good.
No.
That are not good, and that's why a lot of Christians belong to the corporation more than they do to God, and they don't even realize it. The impact of their corporation on their mentality.
Yes.
So this is what we want, the point we want to make. We're not going to be long, but this is a very important conversation we're having here because it's never been addressed with Christians. As a result of these things, we make bad choices in our daily life, and these choices take us further and further down a dark path, especially in cases like the indoctrination of corporations and the genetic bad habits that we are indoctrinated into. In particular, that one there has to really be addressed, and sometimes not addressed until a person is in their senior years. Okay, so every event that happens in our life, we are presented. In actuality, we're presented with a good and a bad choice, or that bad, you can even substitute the word evil choice, according to Genesis 2:17, which says, bear with me a second here, let me find Genesis 2:17. Let's see. 2:17 says, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. So that tree is representative of paths. Okay? This tree, as you can see, this symbolic tree we have here, you see it dichotomized. That's the term for it. You see a dichotomizing, meaning trees, when they grow, the branches, they split off in different directions, okay? And this is representative of the choices that we're confronted with in life. We're given multiple choices in each situation. It depends on the situation. It can be, it's going to be always at least two choices.
Right. And
those two choices, in most cases, are multiple choices. Okay? And so the choices that we're presented are good and evil. On one side, good, and on the side, evil or bad. There's always, however, one best choice. Okay? But also we have several other good choices, and that's what complicates the matter. There are always other good choices and many bad choices. Now, these other good choices, when they're looked at closely, they're not so good because there's a price.
Right.
You may get a benefit, a positive, but there's some catch to those other good choices.
Yes, it's always a negative too.
Right.
When it's not God's perfect will.
Right. And that perfect will is that one best choice. Okay? If we take the choice that God commands us, the good choice, good and evil, the good choice, we will have the best outcome. This will be the one best choice, as I said. All the other choices usually have repercussions. Not usually, they have repercussions, Okay? There are rewards for taking the right choice, but there are consequences for bad choices. Any one of those choices that are bad, or the ones that appear that are good but not the best choice, there's a consequence. Okay? So remember, there is always one truth. There's only one truth, but many opinions. Okay? The best choice is the truth. Okay? If we take the wrong choice, it sometimes appears to be a good outcome, but in the end we get bad results or we pay a price. It doesn't end there, because our choices create new choices. And so sometimes it can appear to be a good choice, but it leads you down a rabbit hole. And you find out it wasn't a good choice because it led into other choices that you had to make that were exhausting, or that a price had to be paid. Okay? So this is how life works. The dichotomizing of the tree is representative of life. Okay? So it doesn't end there, because our choices create new choices. When we are when we have two choices and they dichotomize, so there are multiple choices, it gets complicated in those situations. So life is a process. Life, when we make a choice, it's not that we're making just one choice. It is leading in a particular direction. We're going down a pathway, a process. Okay? Life is more complicated than it appears. And the more simple things are, the more complicated they are. And the more complicated you think they are, the more simple they are. You know, if I said that right, that's how complicated it is. Okay? So, but this is the point that I'm making. This is something that God showed me. This is something that we've discovered. And we want you to see the wisdom of this. Okay? So, a choice is not, it doesn't stop with a choice. Choices lead into other decisions where you have to make other choices. And so the crowd, when you make a bad choice, the crowd will encourage you on. It'll encourage you on. They'll pat you on the back and pull you on in that wrong path. If you live in the truth, you will see that the path is not the correct path, and you will make a quick correct. So when you are on the wrong path, there are many encouragers. Okay? This is how life works. When you are on the right path, you are quite often alone.
Yes.
Especially during the time we're in now.
Yes.
Okay? With so many atheists and agnostic and whatever else ostic there is, you know, I mean, every kind of.
You know, that's like the prodigal son. As long as he was just living a reckless, wild life, he had a lot of people. When he decided that this is not for him, everybody left him.
Right.
He was alone.
Right. He was in the pig pen by himself.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the further you get from the original starting point, that good place that God originated you from, the less, the further you get from where God started you from, the less you can hear God. Okay? The crowd, as you go farther away from God, you know, like when people start falling, when they move away from their salvation, they don't realize salvation is a process, that God has to save them more than once.
Yes,
and
he does.
so as they move further away, you don't even realize it, but you're hearing him less.
Yes.
You are having fewer visions, perhaps. Sometimes, though, it's a process, but other times, there are different ways that God communicates to you.
Right.
Okay, different ways of hearing him. Those become infrequent the further people move away from God, and they don't even realize it. But God is saying something in that process. He's trying to say, hey, you're getting a little further away from me. Okay?
Right.
And at the same time, the crowd will start drowning out the God's voice as it becomes weaker. As his voice becomes weaker, the crowd voice becomes stronger. And so that makes it even harder for you to hear him.
Yes.
Okay? This is how this process plays out. And when you get so far, then the dark spirits or evil spirits, their voices are heard more clearly.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes. And sometimes people mistake these evil voices for God voices.
Yes.
This is how this process works. Everything's a process. So the evil voices become louder and God's voice become fainter. Okay? Eventually, you move so far down the wrong path that God can only speak to you through catastrophic events, through things that he will allow things to happen just to get your attention, just so you can hear it.
It happens. Yes.
This is the bad fact of the matter, okay? So the further you get from God, the more evil will happen in your life because you are less protected. When you're not close to him, when you're not close to a strong friend, then you're vulnerable to the bullies.
Exactly.
In the same process, the same ideology. Okay? So the further away from you get from God, the more evil will take place in your life. And God will even have to cause a catastrophic event or something to get your attention to let you know, hey, you're moving away from me.
Yes.
And you're unprotected. You're unguarded. So this is how this process works. And this is what I wanted to bring to our listeners to make them understand that we are a victim of our own selves. Because this is how this process makes us a victim. This is how we actually victimize ourselves, I should say. So, in closing, this is a process that I wanted you to be aware of as believers. So, you need to be aware of this. This is all I need to say about it. Prophetess, if you have, give you the last words. So,
it's very important that you may have to listen to this lesson again so that you can realize that a lot of people are not aware that when they make choices that they have the dichotomy of the tree, that one choice can lead to another choice, and that what may seem to be good, in the end, it turns out to be evil because of what you have to pay, the penalty for making that particular choice. So again, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. We hope that you really enjoyed this. Click the like button, subscribe, tell your friends about it, join us on Patreon, help us to produce even more better quality videos for you in the future so that you can grow in your Christian faith.
We thank you again. This is Prophet Lynn Templeton signing off. So long.